Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we got another great show for you this evening. We have William, or Bill, as he likes to be called, Grabowski. He's going to be talking about he had a number one seller on Amazon, and Black Light, it was called, Perspectives on Mysterious Phenomena, and we're going to be talking all about that, his interest in UFOs, and a lot more. For all of those out there that celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas to you. That's coming up in just 2 days. That's why we're a day early here. We are going to be doing that next week as well. And that way the radio station is not going to be playing on New Year's Eve or tomorrow night on Christmas Eve. So we're going to get them the file early. Next week, this week again, I told you it's Bill Grabowski. Next week is going to be another interesting show. It's going to be about all about Star Trek. Now, for those Trekkies out there, it should be interesting. I'm going to pull up the name right here in just a second of who we have. We have two people on. One is actually he plays Captain Kirk, and I'm sorry, my computer's just a little bit slow here. And his name is Mark. I just can't pull up his last name. He's in the new Star Trek that just has come out recently, and they the co-host for that show that's going to be with him, co-guest I should say, is someone that has written a book recently also. And I see these people without their names on it right here, right in front of me. It's pretty funny. I know, isn't that funny? I just have their pictures right here. Anyway, it's Star Trek Continues. That's who he plays. Captain Kirk is going to be on that. And the book, it's actually an audio book. I believe it's called These Are the Voyages. And Mark Cushman and Vic Mignogna. That's who's going to be on the show next week. So tune in for that. Again, Merry Christmas to everyone out there who celebrates. Happy holidays and all that. It's a wonderful time of year. It's actually pretty warm here in Maine, seasonably warm. Gotta love that. And in the second hour, we will be taking calls tonight. So we're not on KGRA radio live this week, so we'll be taking calls at the old number that will be posted. And if you want to write that down, if you're listening on YouTube right now, I will have it on the screen, but it is 603-967-4030. Again, that'll be up in the second hour. I guess it's time to, well, let me just a couple of other things real quickly. Alejandro couldn't make the show tonight once again, but he did say, Merry Christmas to everyone out there, and hopefully he'll be on. If not, if Alejandro doesn't come back, we're not fighting. He's not ill or anything like that. Has nothing to do with anything that people are speculating that are writing me. It's just that he has just at this time decided that he didn't want to be on. I know he was on Coast to Coast the other night. But anyway, hopefully he'll be back. If not, we may do something different down the line. I'm not really sure as far as UFO news goes. But I do want to thank everyone that helps out with the show and supports the show. Anyone can do that. All you have to do is go over to podcastufo.com, and you'll see the information over there. There's also a Patreon site, and you can listen to the full 2-hour shows if you just help us out. We also have a blog up. Charles Leo wrote a blog for this week, and it's called The UFO Archives of the University of Manitoba. And that's about Chris Rutkowski, that is, who has donated a lot of UFO material to the University of Manitoba. So check out that blog on podcastufo.com. Over at Facebook, we have news stories posted by Peggy almost every single day regarding UFOs and space. Check it out. Recently, I've been getting some email from listeners about the arts parts, as they used to be called, how they may be just like radiator materials. Now, I don't want to lead anyone astray or wrong or anything. I know Linda Moulton Howe was involved or has the materials or had the materials. To the Stars Academy also had some type of involvement. It seems like at least part of that could be just simple foil from a car radiator. But I don't know about any of the other materials. I think the chain of ownership is kind of iffy on that whole a lot of stuff. I don't really have too much more as far as what I've been hearing from listeners as far as all that goes. I do know that also Palmer has sent me a couple of UFO stories. He helps out quite a bit with stories, in that there is another witness that has come forward on the USS Nimitz case, another pilot. I believe that's so. I don't have any of the details there, but hopefully I'll have some more information on that next week. And I think that's enough for me right now. So let's call in our guest, Bill. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
Yes, you were on a long time ago with I had surgery and I was out, and Michael Lauk, who filled in for me. So I think that was that 4 years ago or something like that?
Excuse me, that was September 2015.
Yeah, wow, time is flying. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, so anyway, for a lot of people are not familiar with you and your work. If you would, could you please give our listening audience an idea of who you are and your background and what sparked your interest in this topic?
Well, the whole interest began, aside from the usual growing up or coming to age rather, like in the 60s and early 70s in Northeast Ohio, and usually kids my age, we grew up watching Star Trek and the science fictional movies and stuff, horror movies. But in my case, the direct influence came from something that happened to me when I was 10 years old, and living in a northeast Ohio suburb called Solon, Ohio. It's about 15 miles southeast of Cleveland. And this was in June. It was very hot out. My father had built an above-ground pool, one of those like aluminum deals.
Yep.
I don't know, maybe it was like 15 feet in diameter, and we had a shed, a plywood shed out there, a changing shed. And I was going out to swim, and I came around the corner of the shed, and I saw some sort of a bird that looked like it was about 3 or 4 feet tall and had a straight pointed beak. And I knew enough from seeing these this like Kiwi brand boot polish, as bizarre as it sounds. And this is what this bird looked like. It had black, beady eyes and a long, straight pointed beak. And I didn't know what to make of it, so I just stood there looking at it, and it started to walk toward me. I freaked out and ran inside. My mother was there. She wanted to know what happened, because by that point I was very upset. She thought that maybe someone had gotten a hold of me and tried to molest me or something, and she went out there and didn't see it. And then later on in the day, my father came home, and we were in the basement. I was still upset. He had got me a new pair of boots. These were like Wellington cowboy boots, and he said, "Let's just shine your boots. You'll feel better." So I was okay with that. I'm 10 years old, and I'm still terrified. And he took out the boot polish with the kiwi bird on it, and I said, "That's what I saw." And he's going, "You saw this? What are you talking about?" I said, "That bird on the cover there of this polish. That's what it resembled." And he didn't know what to make of it. He was upset, and in retrospect, I can tell he didn't want me to know how upset he was about whatever it was that I saw. And that I don't know what you would call it. Was that being traumatized? I don't know. Maybe it was, but that started my interest. And also, not long after that, there was the case of these police officers who chased a supposed UFO from Ravenna, Ohio, across the border into Pennsylvania. And because of this, apparently they had gotten into a lot of trouble by even reporting it by police authorities. And one of the officers who was involved in this chase, he was very screwed up by it, and he actually just left. He just dropped his whole life, and he hid out in the Solon Motel in my hometown. This was in the newspaper. People were talking about it, like, did you hear about this police officer who said he chased a UFO? So it's just, I'm just adding a few more stones to the pool. Like, something was going on in the, as you probably know, there was a so-called UFO wave in the mid-'60s.
Oh, yes.
I guess this was part of that. But anyhow, between that incident of seeing this strange bird that happened to me, pardon me, and this police car chase, which I think was recreated in Close Encounters of the Third Kind in the beginning of the film. That's what sparked my interest, which became kind of, obviously it became a lifelong interest enough to write a book about it and go from there.
Have you ever personally talked to other people about any type of UFO encounters or anything like that?
Yes. I guess you could say officially, at like announcing myself as a writer. The first time I ever really interviewed people was in Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Oh yeah, the Mothman.
Yeah, exactly, in 2003. And prior to that, I had read, even long before that, when I was in high school, I read the Mothman Prophecies, and of course we know that's a classic that came out in 1975. And when I was reading that, I had kind of a resurgence of remembering this thing that I saw, right? This bird that could have very well been just an out of place bird I wasn't used to seeing, or something else, I don't know. But reading Keel brought that all back. And then much later on, I'm still following the field, reading the books. I'm also reading the guys like Philip Glass, he was the hardcore skeptic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a few others, and then I'm reading more of Keel, which eventually led me to, I think I found out online about this festival they have every year in Point Pleasant, the Mothman Festival. They figured out, okay, here's a way to help the town make money, and because Point Pleasant is a small place, and it's surrounded by a lot of industry on the Ohio River, but this festival really has taken off, and to make a long story shorter, John Keel was there in 2003, and that was, knowing that he was going to be there, that got me to go. So I met him briefly. At that point, he was almost completely blind. I had no idea about that, but he was in a small, I guess it used to be just a regular shop, and they made it so he could have people file in there, sign autographs, sign books, and I don't know if they weren't prepared for this or what, but there were a lot of people getting his autograph, and this was shortly after the movie version of Mothman Prophecies came out, so obviously that gave it a huge boost. So I got to talk to him briefly, took some photographs. Unfortunately, not very good photographs because I was using a disposable camera, but I did get to speak with some of the original witnesses that he mentions in Mothman Prophecies. And it turned out that the town was still like it was when these things happened in 66 and 67, still divided. Part of the town was like, they seemed embarrassed, yet they still showed up for the festival, right? And then the other ones were like, oh, this is all completely true. It ruined my family. It drove my grandmother crazy, and but that's how the whole thing. That's how it was sustained with me anyway, and that was also what started this idea about writing a book. It took me a long time to get that far, though.
Yeah. Speaking of books, you've written how many now? Is it 9?
Right, including Black Light is the only, thus far, nonfiction book. All my other stuff is fiction, like primarily dark fiction, like horror, and the darker end of the science fiction, cyberpunk spectrum.
And you have a Cold World. That's an upcoming book that you expect coming out. That's also going to be nonfiction, right?
Right. That will be it's related to Black Light, but a very different kind of book. It's kind of, whereas Black Light could be described as, well, it's a deconstruction of the UFO field and paranormal, and Cold World is more like, I don't want to say attacking, but let's say it's a survey of current day philosophy, like speculative realism, and really about trying to dig into what you could call the operating system of reality and the world, and how much it's changed since the internet came to life.
Yes, that topic does come up on the show. Has come up, for instance, a number of times. I've talked to old-time researchers and have said to them, what has happened in the world of ufology since the internet, came around. What are some of the changes? There's the good and bad. I could think of almost as many bad as I could good. For instance, CGI, when it comes to YouTube and all that. And there are a number of there's a website devoted to the skepticism, good skepticism of UFOs, to keep, more or less keep people honest. I can't think of the name of it right now, but on that, what's that?
Is that Robert Schaefer, Bad UFOs?
No, I know who that is. Actually, I met him in Phoenix a few years ago. This is actually. I wish I could pull it up. I sent an email to him, asking him if I could use some of his information. But I do believe that he had called out 64 YouTube channels that were sending out, basically hoax videos in order to gain traffic, in order to make money.
To get clicked. Right.
And there was one channel supposedly that was making, several $1,000s a week just on, fake YouTube videos out there, which is, it's really a shame when it comes to someone that is trying to take a serious look at, what's going on, and they get hung up on a couple of videos they find out later that are just fake, and then they'll just go away. They'll no longer have interest in it. Kind of burns them out.
As this happens way too much.
Yeah. Nothing anyone can do, only, perhaps call out when you see something like that. And then also just keep our side of the road clean, as they say. And, make sure that we don't ever give any gasoline to the fire of any of the, fraudulent stuff out there.
Right. That's the best way. I mean, it's been said before. Like, the burden of proof is on the people who are putting these videos up. And they have no choice really but to submit to, whatever analysis people like me or you would apply to it. But the burden of proof is on them, because you're right, with CGI. I mean, I've seen some videos, I'm sure you have, where they're incredible, and you get transfixed, and then you realize, well, okay, I know a little bit about how CGI works, and this is probably how this was done, and then, thank whatever's in charge. Usually someone shortly comes up with, okay, here's what this video is about. Here's how it probably was done, and then they, of course, they have to say, here's how we know it's fake.
Yeah, and I personally appreciate that. I try to run a show that we try to stay as solid as we possibly can on such an unusual topic that is, that we actually have no proof of what it is that we're seeing,
Right.
Other than the fact that we're definitely seeing something,
Right.
And what's your feeling about what people are seeing? I know I've heard you say something along the lines, it doesn't mean that there's any proof that it's ET, and I agree with you. I just feel like and I've said this a number of times, that I feel like I know less about the topic the more I get into it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the only thing that hasn't changed about the way I feel about it is I think that whatever it is, the least likely thing is extraterrestrial. And hopefully you didn't just lose like 5,000 listeners by me saying that. but somebody has to say it. It because people who are easily manipulated, and usually it's through. I know Keel was big on this about the power of belief systems, and on how they have slowly. I don't want to say completely, but largely replaced like the religious impulse in some people, to where not only, and I found this out in Point Pleasant, not only do they believe some stuff, they need to believe it. And if you get, let's just say, if you get cranky toward them and say, well, what are you? Are you a nut? Why would you believe this crap? And they would say, it's not about, you can tell me anything you want, sir, with facts. I don't care. I believe it. I know what I saw, right? And you can't say, as I found out, no, you don't know what you saw, because you don't know enough about, astronomy and physics and in the case of like with Mothman, right, a so-called crypto-terrestrial, you don't know about how stress affects you, but see, you can't stand there and tell that to people with a straight face, because they're gonna, it could get violent. Just like, trying to, if you go up to, like a devout Catholic and say, do you know that what you believe in is irrational? They're not going to, they might not want to leave you standing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been wars over things like that. Absolutely. Yeah, I think my personal thoughts is that some of what people saying, now I feel like I'm sounding like Stanton Friedman, because he said, some of what people are actually seeing out there, he did believe was extraterrestrial, and I'm thinking that it is possible that some of what people are seeing is extraterrestrial. I wouldn't rule it out.
Sure, and that's as far as I can go. Right, I cannot. The saying is, you'll be intellectually dishonest if you say no chance, none of it's extraterrestrial. I would never go that far, because it could be. I just don't know that it is.
Yeah. But as far as we're going to be going into break in just a couple of minutes here. As far as your book that is coming out, when you say you're kind of picking apart the beliefs, does this also cover the UFO phenomena as well in this book?
There will be a chapter, maybe two, that does get into there, and it's more covered in philosophy. There's this thing called speculative realism, and what it is, it's looking at, like, let's just, for a really quick example here, like someone points at a table and they say, whatever that object is, it's not a table. We call it that, but in reality, it's just, it's an object with legs. And the scary thing about speculative realism and object-oriented ontology is that it looks at humanity as objects, okay? Not like objectifying, but as if it's like stripping the world down to its basics, and what's left over is really unpleasant to think about. Like for instance, nothing in the world needs us. If we disappeared tomorrow, no animal would miss us. Things of that nature. And the point is, so you can start all over again and build it back up and look at it with a clearer eye.
Yeah, I think the world would be actually better off without us. I hate to say it, but
it might agree with you, Martin.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's time to go into our first break. So hang in, everyone. We'll be right back. This is Martin Willis with William Grabowski, and we'll be right back. All right. So welcome back to the show. My guest tonight is William, or as he likes to be called, Bill Grabowski. So let's see. As far as if it were ET and it was actually confirmed that these are extraterrestrial that are visiting us, if it ever was at any given time, do you think we're in a different place than we were, say, 25 years ago, as far as how society would handle something like that? And if so, or if not, why so? Or why not?
Yeah, I would say we're in a very different place. And again, going out on a limb here, I'm glad that I'm not standing in the midst of a huge crowd. When television came around, people were very concerned that it was going to rot the imaginations of mostly of kids. It's always the kids, right? Protect the children, and I'm all for that. Why shouldn't they're the future? They have to be protected. But television was initially, it was feared, right, that it would really corrupt people. But the big difference now is watching television is a passive experience. It's not interactive. These days it is, right? You can change the channel, you can binge, watch, whatever you want. You can watch all of Breaking Bad in a week or whatever. But the point is, the culture has changed completely, and now with the power of belief, the chances for manipulation are deeper. But like the general population is now so used to kind of a fragmented attention span, and that's another big thing. All the internet is killing attentions. Well, it is, and if you spend too much time on it, you build up an impatience with things, and this is also, as I've found out, is hurting the publishing industry, where and it's dangerous to say things like, well, the average person, blah blah blah, because when you try and find the average person, that person doesn't exist, because you're trying to put a group of people into one hole, and you can't do that. But attentions are, I follow things. I pay attention to what comments people make, and even like they may be reading an article that's fascinating, and they might say, "Oh wow, that was long," and then I'll look at it and go, "It was like 4 pages. That's too long." And it's kind of a fear I have. Like, I'm a guy who writes books. Well, is there really a future in that? Because personally, I don't like e-books. I don't enjoy that experience. Some of the books I get to review for Library Journal, sometimes they're e-books. Mostly they're not, though. They're really good about sending hardcover. But the experience of always being in this sort of eternal present moment is stressful. And I find that that's more true about people my age. Like I was born in '58, so I'm older than a lot of people. But anyhow, it seems like it's harder on those of us who were around before the internet and then had to adapt to it than it is on people who kind of were born into it. They don't really see, like, well, why are you so upset about this and that? And it's almost like, well, if you don't know how to drive a car and you've never wrecked one, you will not be able to understand what that feels like.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you, and the age and everything. And no, I totally get it. And I also, you're talking about all the information coming at us. That's what it's about, and why the attention spans are so short. I do believe it's like everything is being pelted at us in all different ways,
right.
And you
There's
can't.
no discretion.
Yeah, and then if you, I never really talk about too many personal things in my life, but my career has been extremely busy. That's why I missed out on doing a show last week. It's just has really taken off and been very busy. But also, I took a segment out of my life that had to do with internet and had to do with paying attention. And then as I decided, I don't know, maybe a month ago, this is something very personal to me,
Right.
and I'll probably get email about it. Is that I decided about a month ago to completely disconnect from politics. completely, because it was actually getting me down, and the divisiveness in this country, and the attacking, and the negativity. So I completely got rid of all my news apps. I completely got rid of anything that had to do with news. I'm off of Facebook, everything. And I got to tell you, I feel I have more time for myself. I feel 100% better. And it's just something I had to do. But just kind of segueing into the amount of information that's out there that's coming at people all the time. And I think this is also in the respect to people that are looking into this topic. They can find all kinds of information, podcasts, videos, and can get led astray fairly quickly. So there you go.
Yeah, I completely get every word you said, and the thing is, especially when filtered through, all the UFO stuff, what I'm seeing is, and again, not to harp on younger people, is that not only are they not aware of like the older cases, there's almost a sort of a grudging acceptance. Well, I don't have to know that stuff. It's all on the internet. And to someone like me who values books and learning and all that, I'm like, well, how can you say that? It's not. Don't rely on the internet for information. Rely on what you learn, and teach yourself. And man, that'll get you slapped down fast in some quarters. The idea of, well, why do I need to know, geography, general geography or whatever, general history, when I can just look it up?
Or history.
I'm like, well,
yeah.
Right, history would depend. When you go to, it depends on where you get your information. I'm not so sure a lot of people using the internet are aware that there are so-called authority sites, and there's a dangerous word to use right there, to look at. Like Wikipedia is not the ultimate authority on anything, in my opinion.
That's right. Yeah.
Now if I want to know something and be certain about it, let's say there's a small country I don't know a lot about. Am I going to go to Wikipedia? No. I'm going to go to like National Geographic. I'm going to go to some, God save me, some government database and look at that. Because these people are paid to provide, correct information. They're liable for it. That's why I would trust it. If someone has something to lose by putting up, bad information, that person can probably be trusted. Now, if they have nothing to lose, Wikipedia has nothing to lose if they put crap up there.
Anyone can come in and just edit out?
That's the thing. When I first heard about that, I'm like, man, that's a bad idea. Now I understand democracy and all that, right? But when it comes to, okay, 2 and 2 equals 4, right? Yes, it does. And guess what? That never changes. No matter what you say about it, you can hate 2 plus 2 equals 4, but that's what it is. And Wikipedia seems to say, no. It's what I say it is because I'm allowed to. And, that's a can of worms there.
Yes. So it's like, here we are in the information age, but it's a double-edged sword. I think that's kind of what the tone of this conversation is. It's a double-edged sword because
it is.
There's as much misinformation as there is information, and to try to sort it all out, especially when it comes to something like UFOs or anything, paranormal. So what you mentioned earlier that it's almost like a religion, and what do you think pop culture, plays into, say, something like UFOs?
Hugely, absolutely hugely. I recall discussing this with Michael Lauk when the last time I was on Podcast UFO, and we probably got a little too deeply into that, but I think for a good reason. Like pop culture, and everyone's affected by it. It's like the air, you're a fish in water. You don't even notice it hardly, and I think it does affect people's viewpoints on UFO reality or non-reality, and some of the movies, television shows, they're so like visually sophisticated that you're affected emotionally, and you want to believe things. Or there's that old saying, from the X-Files, I want to believe. I always hated that poster in Mulder's office, because I always think, no, I don't want to believe. I want to understand. There's a difference. And pop culture really works that, like they do work on people's beliefs and emotions, because that's how they stay in business. So, at the bottom of that, there's this whole, bottom line mentality, and it's also been called predatory capitalism. Not that I'm like anti-capitalist. I'm anti-bad capitalism to where all it cares about is manipulating people's feelings so they'll buy more stuff.
Yes. Capitalism is not perfect, that's for sure. And it just seems that we can always expect a downturn, and we can always expect a recession and depression when we have a capitalism. And I don't know what the answer is. It could be tuned up, possibly, but yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, well, it's a big game, but at least in America, it's kind of like, well, it's the only game in town, and you have to pay attention to it, and try and avoid falling into traps, like verify things that you see online or on television, because it's so easy to fake today.
And what exactly? I've never really heard predatory capitalism. In how does that work with what our topic is about?
Well, one word springs right to mind, like clickbait. We started talking about, and as far as like UFO phenomenon goes, and especially places like YouTube with these videos and see that's the whole thing. Like exactly that's the bait. That's what draws people in, and then and you can't really fairly blame the individual for going, holy crap, have you seen this video? Because I myself have been in that seat. I still am some days where I'll see a video and go, that's astounding. What is that? And then someone else does the work for me, and they say, well, no, here's how this really worked. But had I not known that, and I was in a, whatever, anxiety mood that day or something, I may have went, that's absolutely real, and you cannot tell me it's not.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the Alien Autopsy film when that came out in the 19...
yeah, I was one of the poor sods who went out and bought the VHS. I had to see more.
Well, I do remember. I wasn't paying any attention to the UFO field at that time, and I had a busy an auction company basically. So I was extremely busy, and I remembered like walking past the TV and then seeing an alien being operated on, and going, "Whoa!" And it's kind of funny. Back then, my reaction was, "Wow, hey, well, I guess it's real," and then I moved on. I didn't even, and I'm wondering if there were other people that, or if this is what will actually happen once, we really actually do find there's intelligent life out there.
Well, right away, and I'm glad I heard your example, that you were able to see that, right? And then go, well, I don't know. And you were not, instantly crazy about it, obsessed with it. And when I saw that, I was like, okay. What I thought was, that is either, that's got to be real, or it is the best hoax I have ever seen. And this, in my case, I think I've been on the internet maybe 2 years when that came out of like 97 or something like that, 96.
Sounds about right. Mm-hmm.
And then I saw it it was covered on one of the UFO magazines, and then it started to get like mainstream news coverage. I'm like, this cannot be real, because if it were, there's no way that sort of a thing could be kept under wraps. The way people talk, even people who are, supposedly like working in the intelligence community, there are leaks all the time. And something that big, I'm thinking, no way, that cannot be hidden. And then, of course, it turned out to be a hoax. Now we know how it was done and all that, and they tried to, tie it in with Roswell.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that tie-in with Roswell, and it's funny. The funny thing about the leg, that's kind of like burnt off one of the legs, and that was because it was they accidentally did that and then made it look like it was burnt or something.
Right. Right. They incorporated it.
Yeah, yeah. And just recently, there was some talk about that. That I think the owner of the film was trying to say somehow again that it was really real or something along those lines. And of course, Philip Mantle, who's one of the people, he was actually going to be on the show last week and became ill, couldn't make the show. But he is really the one that uncovered the fact that it was fake. He did all the work on that in England. And
this was Philip. What is his last name?
Mantle, like a fireplace
Philip
mantle.
Mantle. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, yeah. So, but no, interesting that he was able to figure all that out. Santilli, I think the person's name is that was involved in that.
Santilli.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, there's a good case right there of something getting out there and the reaction to it. How are people going to react to something like that? I mean, that was worldwide. That went everywhere.
Yeah.
And there was
that was viral before there was viral as a term.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so you mentioned earlier that you don't think that people getting into, say, the UFO topic at all, they're not interested in the old cases, because I do get some. Every once in a while, I'll get an email from a listener that say, "Hey, why do you always talk about the old cases? We're sick of the old cases." But I mean, I guess the best new case, or the one that people are talking about the most these days, is not really new, but it's not really that old. 2004 Nimitz case. That's pretty strong and pretty interesting. Yeah. Have you yourself looked into any of that?
Yes, I have. I guess the first thing that got my attention, it's a personal thing. My cousin used to be on the Nimitz, so I just saw like USS Nimitz. Like, okay, I got to hear about this. And then when I heard what it was about, I was like, okay, now you have my attention.
Uh-huh.
And it's unusual that it's persisted this long, but that just proves how, if someone gets emotionally into something, it's very hard to shut it off. And even if you're a pretty well-educated person, it's hard to overrule emotions with your intellect. And that whole thing there, like my take on it is after reading all the stuff, and I'm still keeping up with it, right, is that it looks to me like it's probably a target drone.
I don't know. There would have to be a lot of questions answered when it came to the capabilities and the. I just don't know. I mean, they're talking about 130 Gs,
right,
for some of the right-hand turns and things like that. There's been a lot of speculation lately on the internet that I've seen, pop up about it being some type of, advanced military, training exercise to see what the Navy would, how the Navy would react and
how they would react, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. When you hear of actually what the thing did and what happened, to me it seems pretty incredible. I really don't know what to think, but I do believe that it's pretty unusual. And then there was also the case, of course, off Florida, 10 years later, that was pretty incredible as well. And
okay. I might not be familiar with that one. What, if you don't mind, briefly, what happened there?
Well, that's where the one of the videos that came out that To the Stars Academy is, had that film. Lou Elizondo had something to do with that film as well. It's called The Gimbal. Are you familiar with that? It turns.
Okay, I'm familiar with the name Gimbal, but I can't. I don't know if I've seen that vid. Or is this the one with the multiple lights over the ocean?
It's the one where it's actually turning. It keeps showing that it's tilting, and then there's the pilots are commenting on it and hey dude, or all that type of stuff.
Oh, now when you put it that way with the dialogue, I think I have seen that video.
That's the one that actually came out on in December 16th, 2017, and the New York Times. It was released the same time that article came out. That's what made the big, all the headlines and all the news stories. Was the gimbal. The Tic Tac video was secondary and one that you see, you rarely see compared to the gimbal's number one video.
Okay, right. Yeah, I can. See in my my addled memory, I'm seeing those two merge, the Tic Tac and the gimbal. And I recall reading about where you can see the pilot dash, right, the readouts and everything.
That's it. Yeah, you see the screen. And the the knots per wind and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. And someone, I don't remember, someone was commenting on, okay, if you look closely at the screen, the pilot screen on this video, and then look at this other one, that's coming to mind for some reason. Like there was either a discrepancy or there was something was brought up about what the pilot could see.
Oh, on the screen, and I don't know exactly what they call it.
I don't either. On the instruments, the readout.
Yeah. So you've kind of followed that. You have followed that whole situation on both sides. To me, we chatted just briefly just ahead of the show, and you mentioned that you have seen different things posted by people like John Greenwald and all that. It's
yes.
It is quite a mystery when all the pieces come together, trying to figure out which way is which. What are your thoughts in general when it comes to what Tom DeLonge has done and the people with him?
There's a whole. I guess I'm glad that I have been following this. The thing is, what it proves about me is that no matter what someone is saying about, is this a UFO? Is this not a UFO? I'm basically relying on three people: John Greenwald, Robert Schaefer, and Jack Brewer. Jack Brewer is. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I consider him a friend, and I trust his. He's about. I guess he's about as objective as a person can be, and be interested in this stuff, and comment intelligently about it. And as far as this recent thing goes, which is really not that recent anymore. And I said earlier that I thought it was a target drone. I should have said no. I think it's like a high performance, classified aircraft or some sort of thing, and that they were testing reactions of pilots. And of course the pilots can't know what it is because they won't get a genuine reaction. And years ago, Jacques Vallée published this. I think it was in Forbidden Science. I mentioned this in my book. There was a memorandum where the military intelligence was suggesting that UFO phenomena be faked to test public reaction. I'm actually looking at my own book right here very quickly. The Pentacle Memorandum and Project Stork. And this memorandum, which Jacques Vallée hid from Alan Hynek for a while, but he eventually showed it to him. And this is an actual memorandum, and I think it was written by the Battelle Institute in Columbus, Ohio, where I used to live, strangely, where they were a think tank. Battelle still is a think tank, and they were suggesting faking UFO sightings and calibrating the public's reactions because they were trying to, it was some kind of this is another classic conspiracy thing where, involved with contingency planning and, what is the government going to do if there is an actual UFO, whatever you want to call it, breakout invasion? How will people react? We have to know how they react. And this Pentacle memorandum was suggesting that. And then later on in time, people have said, other researchers like, well, the UFOs we're seeing today, the triangles and stuff, maybe this is part of that program. Who knows?
Very interesting. Wow. Jack Brewer was on this show back in 2016, and so John Greenwald's been on, and And Schaefer has not been on, but he has been invited.
Oh, good.
I do like listening to people's point of view. Even it doesn't matter if they're a skeptic. It's all interesting to me because I don't think, again, that anyone really has any answers. And
No one has the definitive, whatever that truth, so to speak. And if they have it, they're not talking.
Yeah. Or if they think they have it and say they have it, then run away.
Right. I have the absolute truth, man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Hold on. I'll call you back. So what do you think, if you were out there, like, wanting to get younger people looking into this topic, what do you think a good approach to that is? Do you think, would you go back to the reading of books, or do you just think that that's lost in today's? It's kind of what you're mentioning.
I guess I'm hoping it's not lost. I don't think it is, because that's how I'm making my living as a writer. Not primarily through writing about UFO and paranormal phenomena, but that's still part of my income, right? So in a way, I have to count on my own, let's just call it integrity, and my desire to be truthful, even if it hurts me. So what would for a young person, I guess I would probably, if they were making a serious inquiry, right, I could easily make a list of books, and it wouldn't be a long list. It would not be long. It would probably be fewer than 10 books that I would recommend, and they would just have to read them, or at least parts of them. Because again, this whole attention span thing, that scares me, because if you're not paying attention, you can be manipulated. And then, God, will you even remember, well, what were the actual steps involved in my manipulation? And, like myself, I'm constantly backtracking. Like, if I see a comment about, about a UFO sighting, I'll read them all. Like, a good example is Jack Brewer's website, the UFO Trail, because he gets skeptics all the time, and then he'll also get someone saying, "Oh, Brewer, you're just saying this because you don't ever want to believe in that UFOs can be extraterrestrial." And to his credit, Jack will say, "Well, I don't want to believe it. I want to find out what's actually going on. And if it turns out that they are extraterrestrial, fine. Let's hope that we don't all panic and crack up." But the old cases are still important, and some of them have fallen apart. Some of them haven't, and it's not. I don't think it's good when younger people get impatient with these old cases. Who cares? Well, because that's where all the stuff now and people's attitudes toward it originated. That's why they're still important.
Yeah, very good point. Roswell, we always talk about Roswell. We probably talked about that a million times on this show.
It's not going away.
Yeah, that's not going away, and many people think there has been an explanation that has nothing to do with UFOs. I'm not convinced. The thing I always fall back on is, and listeners may get tired of me saying this, but there was never any reason at all for the Army Air Force at the time to come out with a press release that they caught a flying disc. There was no reason at all that they had to say that part of it.
I agree. 1947. That's easily lost. That was a long time ago. Not even remotely like this world. Especially media-wise. You're right. They had no reason. Like, why that specific thing? And I'm not going to belabor it because you're aware of all this stuff as much as I am. That if that was some psyops, psychological operation, why that? It wouldn't even be like, oh, we're trying to prepare for an alien invasion. That wasn't even in people's minds, not including the military.
Right. No, it's really something, and I think it was Seth Shostak on recently, and he talked about the mogul. And I understand, of course they would not want to talk about that in particular, but still, that was absolutely no excuse in my book for them
Right.
to
I'm
come
sorry,
up with it.
mogul, the weather balloons.
Yeah, yeah. But also there was that mogul that had to do with the listening device for a Russian,
Atom bomb test.
the atom bomb tech. Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know.
Picking up sounds in the upper atmosphere. Right.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, we are about in just a minute here. We're ready to go into a minute or two. We're ready to go into a break, and then when we come back a little bit into the show, we will be taking calls on a different number, not our normal number. Just one thing before we go into break. It's kind of a loose break when we go into it here.
Okay.
The Earth-like planets that have been discovered, in the last several years, do you think that gives more credibility to, I don't know, credibility is the right word for it, more of a chance that there's intelligent life out there?
I do think it adds credibility. Is that's an okay word. In my opinion, again, we have to be clear on that. Like, well, who else's opinion would it be, right? But anyhow, I've been an amateur astronomer since I was like 18 years old, building telescope stuff. So that's a huge interest to me. And I do think finding these extrasolar, Earth-like planets, it adds hugely to the possibility that we're not alone, because, it's, and I'm not even joking, what a waste of space if we're the only ones in the universe, right?
Yeah. I think personally, that it's very possible. I just don't know, I just don't know if we'll ever find out. I don't know if we are actually being visited by intelligence, if that's actually what it is or part of what it is. I guess I could understand why they're avoiding us, but it's still...
Sure, right, if they're paying close attention, and why wouldn't they if they discovered other life, especially our type?
Right. I have heard people say something along the lines, it would be like us talking to ants, so there'd be no real reason for it. And that, they could be that much more intelligent. And, that is, all these things are possible.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Right, the gap, the intelligence gap would have to be massive if they have the tech to get here.
Exactly, especially crossing the amount of space that has to be crossed. All right, we're ready to go into a break. So hang in, everyone. We'll be right back. Just 1 minute or two. We'll be right back right after these messages. All right, here we are. We are back with Bill Grabowski. Bill, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks. It's good to be here.
And we have not talked too much about your book. Again, can you throw the title out there?
Yeah, the title is Black Light, Perspectives on Mysterious Phenomena. And the reason it's called Black Light is it has nothing to do with the object, the black light. And maybe I was being a little punnish, trying to be a little bit funny. Whereas a lot of the so-called knowledge about UFOs and paranormal phenomena, comes from the so-called black world, the secret world, and so that was why I titled it that. Like maybe I can shed some light on black operations and stuff. So that's why I called it Black Light. And then the subtitle is probably more important because I wanted to be clear that every chapter in the book, these are perspectives about, okay, what could UFOs be? What could a poltergeist be? Not here's what I think it is, and you better believe that that this is true because I'm telling you. It's based on a survey of very skeptical people. It's based on surveys of people who absolutely are believers, and they will not, they don't want to hear otherwise. And then also people who are in between, like, well, I'm not sure. I would probably have to see it, see a UFO right before me, and maybe even then I still wouldn't think it was extraterrestrial. A lot of it's based on how people feel about these things. It's based on their, I guess what a psychologist would call your chronic emotional state. If you're anxiety-ridden, you're going to have bad experiences. If you're a believer in the paranormal and UFOs, you're probably going to have bad experiences. And then someone else who is like let's just say a really solid, low anxiety person, they could see something and say, well, you know what? That's really strange. I don't know what that is, but it doesn't frighten me. So there, there are the fields, as you mentioned earlier. There's a lot of divisiveness, and even if there was no internet, it still would be that way. It was that way in the in the 60s and in the 70s and even before that.
Right. Well, it is. It really is interesting. As my son has said before, whatever these things are, whether it's a UFO or whether it's an encounter with what people think is a ghost, there's an answer for every single thing that happens. But it's just that sometimes we don't know what that answer is.
Right. And what seems to be happening now, I also covered this in the book, is that the chapter is called "So What," and it sounds like a little snarky, but I'm serious. Like, so what? What if UFOs are extraterrestrial? What if there are actual lingering consciousness from people who have died? What difference will that make to our lives? And as I just mentioned, well, it depends on the individual. Some people actually will not care if they found out UFOs were extraterrestrial. Well, does that mean I don't have to go to work tomorrow? Probably you still have to go to work, and it'll be a question of, well, now if they were proved to be extraterrestrial, UFOs that is, okay, well then it's up to the individual to decide how do I proceed from this point on? What do I do, or do I just ignore it?
And what do you think, like this society, how would we handle something like that? How do you think we would handle it?
I don't know. I think I'm kind of frightened. Like as I just mentioned, okay, right? If we have, let's say, definitive proof that there's an example. Let's just say an unusual object was tracked, as has happened. And it turned out to be an asteroid or something, but was tracked, which it would be because we know everything. Communications satellites, classified satellites, they're tracking everything. If there's any kind of airspace intrusion or atmospheric entry, whatever you want to call it, it's going to be tracked. There's going to be a record. And if a genuine UFO is tracked, I mean, I have no idea what the official reaction would be, because you can't hide it. You can't hide it anymore. There are people who are just amateurs, have the ability to tap into communications satellites, and you can't hide it anymore. So it would be noticed whether there was official acknowledgement or not. And then the reaction, I think it would be like a Rorschach ink blot test, depending on what kind of a person you are. Some people would panic, but I think most would be amazed and then realize, well, I still have to live. I'm still me.
Yeah.
I'm still alive, and I've only got so much time to live.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's what would happen. I think, there may be a pause and reflection, and then a move on, like you say.
I do think there would. I think there would be a big pause, really, because the initial reaction, I think, possibly with almost everyone, is going to be they're going to be frightened.
Some certainly. Whether they're predatory or,
right, that would be the whole thing.
I remember watching The Twilight Zone, and I can't remember the exact episode, but it was a spaceship landed, and this really tall robot or something came out, and everybody was getting on board the ship, and there was a book they were trying to crack the code to, and the book was given to someone, a leader or something like that. And
like
the book,
a recipe book.
yeah, it was How to Serve Man, end up being a
How to
recipe
serve-
book.
Yeah,
That was
that's right. I'm
love
sorry.
that
I'm
episode.
sorry. I'm
Scared.
interrupting. I was like pretty much raised on the original Twilight Zone
Yes.
and Outer Limits.
Yeah.
Serve Man.
I
Yeah,
remember that scared the heck out of me as a kid.
It scared me too. I'm kind of amazed I was allowed to watch that
Yeah.
show at all.
Yeah.
Because I was pretty young when the original series came out, like early 60s.
Right. But I think of course, it's all about what their possible intentions are. I mean, you could speculate all you want.
Oh, of course.
But if it's actually what we're seeing here, or some of what we're seeing here, so far so good is what I have to say.
Yeah, we've been around a long time, and I'm thinking like I used to pay closer attention to how far our very first, let's just call it broadcast signals, have traveled in space. Because let's just say we've been active with electromagnetivity since like the late 1800s. I'm thinking like Alexander Graham Bell. I'm going all the way back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those emanations are in space, so they've been out there, 100+ years. So therefore, they've traveled, the speed of light, whatever, and then that signal's gone so far, and that's as far as it can go. And then you've got the whole, well, how far away is the nearest star? Well, it's 4 light years. Alpha Centauri, I think, is the closest one. Not a sun-type star, but depending on what sort of life is there, if any, that might not matter. You go back to the whole, it could be silicon-based, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. So we will take calls if someone wants to call in. It's going to be our old call-in number because we're not live on KGRA. We do not have a screener, so you'll be coming into the show live. And that call number is 603-967-4030. And anyone can call. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say this. The first person to call in right now will get a free T-shirt. If you're looking on, let me see. If you're looking on YouTube, it's this right here, Podcast UFO T-shirt. So that number is 603-967-4030. And all I can do is tell you that I'll save your phone number, and I'll give you a call tomorrow. And make sure you get that T-shirt. One more time, I'm going to just show the T-shirt image. Is this right here? And we do have a website where we sell merchandise, and that's right on podcastufo.com. So all that info is under merchandise there, the T-shirts, coffee cups, you name it. Anyway, first person to call in gets a free T-shirt.
I guess that
Merry
rules
Christmas.
me out as a caller.
Well, you could always hang up and call back, right? But anyway, as far as the future, how do you see the future in UFOs? Everybody talks about disclosure. I mean, I don't think the government's going to be actually disclosing. Personally, I don't think. But what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I'm in agreement with that. I don't think there's going to be any kind of disclosure because, as you well know, there was a lot of talk about that. Over the past 10 years, 15 years with was it that Stephen Greer?
Oh yeah.
And nothing came of that. And then, again, depending on what kind of mood you're in, then I was hearing like, well, is this information, designed to manipulate, or is this misinformation? And I was never quite sure how to take that. But I'm always like, well, yeah, I'm wide open for disclosure. Please bring it on.
Yeah. Hey, we actually have a caller.
Okay, great.
We have two. Someone called in. I'm writing down this number before I bring him in. Hang on just a second. Maybe I didn't. Maybe he didn't come in. Caller, you on the line now?
Yes, sir.
Hi. What's your name?
My name is Ryan from South Carolina.
Hey, Ryan. How you doing? So we will talk tomorrow. I'll get you a T-shirt. We have someone else trying to call. at the same time, but you beat everyone out.
Oh, great. Well, I got to admit the T-shirt was a huge motivation.
Way to go, Ryan.
So, Ryan, I'm going to try to write down your number here. I can't. I got it. Okay. All right. I got it. So I'll give you a ring tomorrow, and we'll settle up with that. And so, do you actually have a question, or you want to wish us all Merry Christmas? Do you have a question for our guest?
Well, let me see. Yeah, I do. First of all, I do want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, of course. And I wanted to. Now, I tuned in late. He may have already talked about this. I know you guys were talking over the old cases before, as I tuned in, and I just wanted to ask his thoughts on a very old case, Roswell. I know you had mentioned your wondering why the Army released that statement. My opinion is because Marcel kind of influenced people to do it. But anyway, I just wanted to catch his thoughts on it, unless he has already given those thoughts.
No, I haven't really. Thanks for that question, by the way. I haven't really gotten into that. And the thing is, like, human evolution in general, I'm changing my thoughts on Roswell, not toward, I don't know, necessarily, like it was said earlier, like extraterrestrial. Is that the explanation? Well, it could be. And then I had the good or bad luck to read this giant book by Annie Jacobs called Area 51.
Arnie?
And she,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're familiar with that book,
yeah.
right, Martin? And maybe, but Ryan, I don't know if you are or not, but the person who wrote that book is a respected journalist named Annie Jacobson, and she said that she interviewed guys, from the old school, right, who know from Area 51, and they were saying, no, it was a Russian psychological ops because inside the craft there was Cyrillic writing in there, Cyrillic being Russian language. And the first thing I thought was, okay, if this was supposed to be a psychological, trying to fake people out just to see how they'd react, why the heck would you like basically sign your name in there and say, no, this is from a different biosphere, this is from outer space. So that doesn't hang well with me, that explanation for Roswell. And this Annie Jacobson is saying, well, this is what she got that story from people who actually worked at Area 51, and I was just like, man, they really played you. So, to get back to your question, personally, I have no idea what happened there. For a long time, and in my book, Black Light, I was saying Roswell had to have been some kind of just like an experiment that went wrong, because supposedly a lot of people died after the 1947 incident. So then I was thinking, like, well, was it a germ warfare thing gone wrong? And the only way to cover it up was to make it even scarier by saying it was a crashed flying saucer, right? So that's what I was going for a long time. Now I'm not really sure, except that something definitely happened.
Yeah, I've kind of become a skeptic of Roswell over the years, and one thing that occurred to me at one point is, why would the American government conceal it? And I'll tell you why they, in my opinion, I don't know that they actually would, and here's why. If you remember the year before, a year later, the Stalin blockaded Berlin. And,
Exactly.
apparently he wasn't intimidated by our monopoly on the atomic bomb. Well, if he wasn't intimidated by that, I mean, wouldn't you want to send him a message, hey, bud, not only do we have a first-rate military, a monopoly on the atomic bomb, by the way, we also have alien technology. Do you really want to mess with us? Do you want to keep pulling these stunts? And
I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's the thing right there that I was forgetting. Now, if America made that claim, hey, we have extraterrestrial technology, pal, you do not mess with that. I mean, what more reason do you need, right?
Yeah. I mean, he would probably. They probably run right back to Russia after seeing that. At least you'd hope they would.
Yeah,
at the very least, they wouldn't be pulling. I mean, Korea may have never happened. I mean, I don't know how many. I don't know what he would have thought about pulling after knowing that. Plus, we had a monopoly on the atomic bombs up at least until '49. So.
Yeah, and then you would have to, the Americans would have to be saying to themselves, well, we better hope they don't call our bluff because we don't have alien technology. If that was actually the case.
But if there actually was an alien crash, you'd want to keep tilting those scales, because they had to be thinking to themselves, well, look, I mean, they likely got into the Manhattan Project. They'll find out about this eventually anyway. I mean, so
Sure.
let's go ahead and tell them, and basically send them. So, I mean, a lot of people think the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were done as kind of a show of force to the Russians. And basically say, look, we don't hesitate to get out the big stuff. Well, if you're into sending a message, that's one message I would send them, me personally.
Yeah, that's right. That's an undeniable show of force, so to speak,
Well,
You cannot mess with it.
interesting topic. Anything else there, Ryan?
No, sir, that's it.
Well, also, I'll just make it easier for you if you want to just email me right now at martin@podcastufo.com. We'll get you a T-shirt.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah. Thanks
right.
for the call. So that line is open, and I'll probably feel generous enough to give out another T-shirt if someone would like to call in. So that is 603-967-4030. And now, interesting point. I've never, ever thought of the subject that, Ryan brought up as never thought of a show of force, a show of power, of reverse technology or anything like that. So we do have another caller coming on here.
That's an interesting topic.
Caller, what's your name and where are you calling from? First name. Caller, can you hear us? I see a caller, but I'm not hearing them. Hello, caller. All right. Maybe they dropped off here. So that line again, once again, is open, 603-967-4030. Huh. It says missed call. Strange. I don't know how that happened. I picked it up. Try calling back. But no, that is an interesting take on that whole situation. I would have never thought of that.
It is, and another part of that, or I guess the part of it is, let's say that there was an actual crash of an extraterrestrial vehicle. Would we be able to reverse engineer it in 1947 or even now?
Yeah. No.
I know the chances would be better now, but back then I could. It's unimaginable.
I've heard people liken it to going back to the Civil War with a iPhone and say knock yourself out.
Yeah, here you go.
Yeah.
You could easily say this came from another planet, and in Civil War time they would say, "I believe you."
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't know what this thing is.
Yeah, that's right. I had Dr. Michael Masters on several months ago, I think 3 or 4 months ago, and his thought was that it's a possibility. He's an anthropologist and a professor.
Interesting.
And he was thinking that it's possible, with how evolution is going, that we may be looking at us in the future, time travelers. And I thought, wow, what another fascinating idea.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's coming in from a completely different direction, which could be equally frightening,
Yeah.
Because that's been played up big time in science fiction, in literature, and in the movies, where we could be completely unrecognizable to ourselves, and whatever, survivors of some horrible environmental thing gone wrong, or whatever.
Well, I don't. If we turn into grays, I certainly don't think we've become more attractive, in my opinion. And that's generally what evolution seems to have done. So I don't know. He did have answers for things like the gray pigmentation and everything, which was pretty amazing.
Did he cover? I didn't actually hear this. Did he cover in far future? Since we would be I'm just guessing here, we'd be more sedentary, therefore we'd have less musculature in the legs, and our heads would grow because of we're using them. We'd be trapped in the mind and using the body less.
That is a good point that never came up. But that's the way we're headed. With technology, less things we have to do, and more time glued to a screen. Of who knows what it'll be in the future. Be looking
I
at,
may actually have first read that particular theory, if you want to call it speculation, from Whitley Strieber when he's questioning himself in communion. Like, what could they be? And I think he brought that up. Like, well, what if they're us from some unimaginable future, and this is why the Greys look this way?
It's interesting. Yeah.
It is.
Who knows? So that line, I know the caller tried to call in. We still have a T-shirt to give away, 603-967-4030, if you'd like to call in. And as far as the military technology, so you talked about the possibility of some type of drone. Do you think that the military the secret projects are so advanced, so much more advanced than we know of or can imagine? And if so, why aren't we using it as wartime, threats? Again, like you said, the power threats. If we have,
that's a damn good point. I think that I don't know if it's generally accepted, and it may even be a cliche at this point. But personally, I happen to accept it. Is that the military technology appears to be about 15 years ahead of what we actually see publicly, and I think this proved out with the F-117 stealth fighter when that was released or revealed, if you want to say, in 1983. It was, a lot of people were shocked by that. They were startled. I know I was. I was like, what is this thing? And then to learn that they had been developing it since long before. I mean, in fact, in the Area 51 book I mentioned, there are photographs of prototypes. And when you like the XR-71 Blackbird, the long pointy ship, supersonic or even hypersonic, that was on the drawing boards like in the late 50s, like incredibly advanced looking. In fact, it still is, even though it's been retired. It's an incredibly advanced looking aircraft that was in development a long time ago, and to see these photos from so long ago, like, wow, it's startling, like literally science fictional looking.
Incredible. I'm trying to take this caller. Caller, are you there? Doesn't seem to be picking. The same person's trying to call in and just does not seem to be picking them up. Caller, are you there? Can you hear us? Caller? I have no idea why that's not working. And next week's going to be the same thing because we have to. Oh, by the way, for the listeners next week, I see the caller try to get in. I tried to take him, and it wouldn't work. I can just say, if you're listening, try again. Next week, our show is going to be at the same time, but it's going to be on Sunday night, ahead of New Year's Eve. So that will be on YouTube once again, Sunday night, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's going to be about Star Trek. It's totally off the UFO topic, but it should be a lot of fun. So anyway, Bill, so as far as what do you consider is the most curious UFO case out there that you've looked into?
Well, I don't know, most curious, but one still in my head all the time, because I think I once had a sighting of a so-called, they're just referred to as black triangles these days.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Or they have been for a while, since I first heard about them during the report of the Hudson Valley River sightings.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Philip Imbrogno, who unfortunately has, I don't know, he is not taken seriously anymore because it was found out that I think he faked some educational credits or something like that.
Uh-oh.
But anyway, he was co-author of the book. I think it's called Night Siege, the Hudson Valley sightings, and I had a sighting of what I thought, and I still think that it was a triangular-shaped vehicle, and it was dark. I saw it at night. It had white lights in a triangular pattern, and it didn't make a lot of noise. And I was interested in UFOs at this point. This was in the early '90s, and I was standing there looking at it, and right at that point asking myself, this can't be happening. What am I actually looking at?
Mm-hmm.
And what I eventually, and this is what I still tell myself, and I think it's probably what I saw. I was living then in near Cleveland, Ohio, right, and my job was nearby, and not too far away, maybe a half an hour away by car, was Akron, Ohio, where the Goodyear blimp comes from. And I still think it was probably, I was seeing some weird light arrangement on, a dirigible on a blimp, possibly the Goodyear blimp, because it comes out of Akron.
Was this like moving lights, or was it a steady light?
These were moving, and it was a rainy night, so it was right there was some confusion, because on a rainy night you can't see. I mean, now if a jet aircraft flew over, you would know what it was because you would hear it. Mm-hmm. And I don't recall hearing any sound at all, but I did see lights, and that really, it threw me, and it also put a bolt of fright into me, because I'm thinking like right away, my emotions are going toward holy, S-H-I-T. I'm looking at an unidentified flying object. I have to be, because I couldn't hear it. And then it slowly came to me, it's got to be a dirigible. But the thing is, if you've seen a blimp fly over you, you can hear that engine. It sounds like a lawnmower.
That's right.
And in this case, I didn't really hear anything. I just saw white lights in that pattern, and I wasn't, the place I was working at, I was like the night computer operator, mm-hmm. doing the nightly backup. There was no noise, like traffic noise or anything to cover it up. So that was a genuine unknown to me, and I don't really know what I saw. I'm just thinking it almost had to be like, some sort of a dirigible, or, the unspeakable. Well, maybe it was an actual, extraterrestrial craft, or I for a while I was leaning toward the classified military craft, but they seem to be, why would they test something potentially really dangerous over a populated area? Because they're liable.
Right. Now, what type of rainy night was it? Was it heavy rain? Was it light rain?
It was drizzly. It was like a humid. I think it was July. It was a humid, rainy night.
The reason I bring that up is, I may be totally off on this, but I would think that usually the blimp flies around in either sporting events or events where there's a chance of a lot of people seeing, advertising or whatever it is the lights are showing. And so I was just thinking on a rainy night, it's less of a chance that you actually see something like a blimp out there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I also know that this is another, like a kind of an enthusiasm of mine since a kid. I love seeing blimps because we were always seeing them flying over our town, being so near Akron, because they were flying from Goodyear up to the Cleveland Stadium for baseball games and stuff and football games, mm-hmm. for coverage, camera coverage. And one time, there was an abandoned airfield across the street from where I grew up. One actually came down there one day, and we all ran over there, and it was like, when you're a 10 or 11-year-old kid, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this. This is great. And they had some kind of a problem. They had to land, and it wasn't there long, but we were all over there. And so seeing that on a rainy night, it was not there. Whatever it was not there to cover a sports thing. Right.
Well, that's for sure. It's funny. I was talking just several years ago. I was walking with my son in Boston, and I saw this blimp, coming over the trees, and I thought, I'm going to get a picture of this. And a lot of people will talk about, why didn't you get that picture of the UFO? Everyone's walking around with an iPhone and camera. So I can't believe that as slow as a blimp goes, by the time I got my camera ready, it was gone.
It was gone. Right.
It was gone.
Right.
So
yeah.
I didn't even have a chance to take a picture of the blimp.
Right. And that's an often cited thing. Like, okay, everybody has cameras, blah, blah, blah. Why are we not seeing better pictures? Well, it's a good question. Why? And then, like, you just proved it. Well, okay, there's a difference between saying, okay, I'm going to always have my phone on me, and I'm going to be ready when I see something I can't describe, right? And then when you go through the actual motions, it's not going to be like you think, where like it's like you're watching a movie. You're going to be a human being looking at something that you're not sure of what it is. Is it a terrorist thing? Is it extraterrestrial? You're going to be feeling some dis-ease.
Yeah, I mentioned this too before when I actually had a UFO sighting that kind of got me interested in this topic. Well, it did get me interested in this topic, but anyway, I don't know if I didn't have my phone on me at the time or anything like that, but I don't think I would have even thought to take a picture because I was just so lost in the moment and so baffled at why there was no noise like you talked about. And I was totally baffled, like, how can something move without making any noise? You know, I mean, that just, I would have probably not taken a picture if I had a camera is what I'm getting at. And
and you know what? In view of that, I've gone as far as, okay, like, let's say I'm aware there's a jet aircraft crossing over, and it's one of those, it's really, really high up, like 5 or 6 miles, 30 or 40,000 feet. I'll stand there and look at it, and I won't hear anything. But then you do eventually hear it if you're paying attention. Once the sound reaches you, you do hear it. It's quiet, but something of that size, imagine taking that down, tens of thousands of feet, you'd really hear it.
That's
and
true.
The fact that, the thing that I saw, was it couldn't have been more than several hundred feet off the ground, and I heard nothing. And that, I have to say that I was really frightened by it. I still don't know what it was, but I didn't jump to, it's extraterrestrial. But like we said earlier, I can't possibly, be intellectually honest and say, no, it can never be, extraterrestrial, because it could have been. I'm just personally, I'm thinking, well, no, it wasn't. It's just, but I don't know what it was.
Right. Have you ever looked into cases like the Rendlesham Forest? Any of that?
Oh, yeah, that's another interesting thing that, is often, dumped on for all. That was psychological ops. People were being tested and calibrated. And, when you read all the viewpoints, and just to be clear, I've probably read everything that can be about that, about Rendlesham, and you're getting this, some of the people who were actually there are saying, I think it was a test. And then other soldiers are saying, no. I was in that forest, and here's what I saw, and it wasn't a lighthouse. I saw an actual, vehicle on the ground, and then they're describing the weird light effects. Yeah. All I can say about that case is it's fascinating, and it strikes me as really unusual that took place. It was actually on the base or very near it. That's suspicious to me, and it still is.
Right outside of left at Eastgate.
Left at Eastgate, right,
yeah.
Right.
But it, that is a puzzling one, and when I've talked personally to a few people that was involved in that, and Charles Halt, his story about the thing looking like an eyeball. That's the like bouncing between the trees, going along, and like molten lava dripping from it. That's what it looked like. By the way, they were never able to find any of that, like trace evidences of that. And then it bursting into 5 lights, and eventually disappearing.
That's what struck me. Kind of like a prismatic, like they describe, like a bursting. Like, wow, it's too bad no one, to our knowledge, caught that on any kind of film.
Yeah. And that's I told him an encounter of a friend of mine who had I was in the fine arts and antiques business. This gentleman's actually on the Antiques Roadshow, on
really?
almost all of them, and he told me of an encounter he had where an object looked like a box, and then it burst into 5 lights right in front of his eyes. His reaction to that, though, was there's no big deal. Like, didn't change his life any.
And those are the most interesting sort of, witnesses, for lack of a better word, where it's just described, because you're probably getting an accurate description. If the person isn't freaking out and they weren't freaked out, they're probably describing what they actually saw, and that's what still puzzles me. It's like, well, you don't know what it was, and I guess that's what keeps me going. Is this intense curiosity? Even though I'm not a believer, I just want to know what's going on.
Right. And just to follow up on that, a military jet was flying toward that when it had burst into lights too.
Really?
It had a lot of things going for it. It was at Amherst College back in the early 1980s when that happened, with a bunch of witnesses. It was right there at the college itself. So, anyway, it is. It keeps me going too, and I like the fact that you talk about the word believe, because a lot of people talk about that word when it comes to UFOs, the thoughts and beliefs and things like that.
They do. It's almost a default reaction. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if this has happened to you and the public talking to someone, but they'll say something along the lines where, so you actually believe in UFOs? And what do you say when someone actually says that to you?
What do I say pretty much what we talked about earlier. Like, no, I don't believe in UFOs, but I do accept that there are anomalous things in the skies, and we're not sure what they are, but we probably can find out if we do the work. But that doesn't explain away everything, because the thing is, and this is something I mentioned in the forthcoming book, Cold World, is that we're trapped in our own, we're trapped in our bodies, we're trapped in a certain viewpoint, and we can't get out of it. So it's going to color everything we see, including UFOs and so-called ghosts. And I hope I'm not that long-winded when I talk to people, because I do get asked, well, you believe in UFOs? And like, well, it's undeniable. People see stuff and they don't know what it is. And that's as far as I go. I say you have to do the work. You have to be, scientific about it.
Right. And speaking of science, science runs from this topic for the most part. Do you think that'll ever change?
You know what? It's not useful. And this was pointed out decades ago. That attitude is not useful. And it's almost as though, like the more absurd things that seem to happen, like when people used to report UFO entities, bizarre-looking creatures like wrapped in plastic, and they came right out of science fiction. It's almost as though the absurdity of that is used against people reporting things, and because then you can be discredited. They're like, you saw what? Like the Rendlesham. You saw what? That makes no sense. That's just not how reality works. But the thing is, we don't know how reality works.
Yeah, exactly. That's very true. Yeah, I've said a number of times, I've had a number of people from the Rendlesham Forest on this show over the years. It's the most convoluted case out there when it
Brother,
comes.
Is it?
It really is, and it comes to what different people's point of view. I mean, there's where John Burroughs thinks he had missing time, but he's not sure, and then someone saw something that looked like an entity. There's all that, and
that's right. There were scattered entity reports. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and then the beams going down to the weapons, most likely are nuclear weapons. I guess it's pretty well known they were nuclear weapons. I remember asking Charles Halt that, and he got offended that I would ask him a classified question.
I have to ask you, Martin. Is that still archived? The Halt interview?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. He's been on a few times. Yep.
Okay, man. Yeah. I've got to hear that.
Yeah.
Or hear those.
Yeah. No, that's. I think the best part of that case is the audio recording that he had running. He had the recorder running the whole time there, and anybody can find that on YouTube. He said that he was really surprised when that actually came out, many years ago. He had.
That's right. The audio. I think I have heard that audio.
Yeah. It basically says it's coming at us, or he says something like he's coming at us, or something like that. and then talks about when the light shoots down right by his feet. And he's described that light as not like a regular beam of light. It's like almost like a tube of light within itself or something. It's pretty strange. And I've heard that other people have talked about beams of light that are just totally different than a normal light beam.
I've heard that. I've heard that too. Like where it's more like a plasma than a beam, a particle beam.
Right. Yeah. It's all really interesting. And again, like you just said a few minutes ago, it keeps me going. You know, the whole we just passed our 8th year anniversary a few weeks ago, and
Excellent.
it's just I can't believe it's been that long. I've been doing this show, but it's just fascinating to hear different things that have happened that are unexplained, and whether they ever will be explained or not, I have no idea.
Well, I certainly don't, but I think what can explain the popularity of podcast UFO is that you do give people, you're going across a spectrum of people. You're not just, you're not weighting it down on one side where, for instance, you're not constantly saying, oh, this can't be real, and you're also not, too hot on, you're not talking up too much the whole belief thing, like you must believe in this. You're genuinely exploring and curious about it.
Yeah, I would say thank you, and that's right. I am going to offer one more time of that poor guy that keeps trying to call and his call doesn't go through.
Get that guy in there.
Yeah, try calling again, 603-967-4030. I just got a text from my good friend Alejandro, and I don't know if it has to do with the show or not. I'll read it in a minute. But anyway, that line is open. Feel free to call in, and you will get yourself a free T-shirt, 603-967-4030. And I'm also going to ask if anyone wants to post any questions up in the chat room. We got about 5 more minutes. Oh, okay. All Alejandro was saying is that he said for me to say bah humbug to everyone, but I didn't say that. And he just texted saying, when you do your show, say hey, Merry Christmas to everyone. So Alejandro says Merry Christmas to everyone out there. Alejandro Rojas has been on this show for, 5 or 6 years, something like 4 or 5 years anyway, doing the UFO updates, and he's had a few changes in his life and has been moving and hasn't been on for about a month now. So we hope to get him back. I'm not sure if Alejandro doesn't come back, what I'm going to do. Okay, same caller is trying again. Cross your fingers. Caller,
I'm crossing.
Can you hear us, caller? Caller? I have no idea why that's not working. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if I can catch his number. I'm going to try to see if I can call him. And I'm not sure what he's calling from, but I know it's the same number trying to call. And anyway, I don't want to waste airtime on that. I will probably just try to call him after the show and get him that T-shirt. I will tell you, caller, why don't you do this? I can see your number briefly. I see that you're calling from New York. It looks like a New York City number. Give me an email at martin@podcastufo.com, and I will set you up with that T-shirt. Hopefully you had a really good question for our guest. I think we're about at the end of our show here. Now, when do you expect your next book to come out? You say it's a book in progress right now.
It's looking like summer 2019.
Uh-huh. And the name that's the working title. That's going to be the title of the book.
The full title is Cold World, The Horror of the Real. And by the horror of the real, and I mean basically like reality stripped down to its basic structures, like things in the actual world, and the way we respond to them can be deeply disturbing, as disturbing as any UFO thing. I guess I'm trying to show the genuine strangeness of the real world in this book.
Do you mean
and look?
okay? Do you mean also like natural phenomena too, or just unexplained things?
Yes, also natural phenomenon. The strangeness of that, like things like tornadoes, and that's an entire topic on its own right there. Storms and how strange some of the strange things that can happen during a storm.
Right. Yeah, I know there's like earthquake lights, and there's just all kinds of very strange things that I have that people just don't have any idea what they are. I mean, they were saying UFOs, but they're just basically probably a natural phenomenon.
Right. I think Michael Persinger, wrote a book about those earthquake lights.
Yeah.
Canadian, I think he is.
Right. Really interesting. All that. All right. Well, excellent. Well, thanks so much, Bill. It's been a real pleasure.
You're welcome. It has been a pleasure, Martin. I'm glad we finally got to speak.
That's right. All right. And you have yourself a nice Christmas.
You too. Thank you very much.
All right. Good night now.
Good night.
Okay, everyone. Well, that's it for the show. Now, next week, it's going to be Sunday night, because of the New Year holiday. And we are going to have Mark Cushman on and Vic McNogna. And they are going to be talking about basically it has to do with Star Trek. And Vic he plays Captain Kirk on the new Star Trek Continues. He's going to be also on the show together, so that should be interesting. And if you want to check out podcastufo.com, you can see the membership. You can listen to the full 2-hour shows for free in your media player, or log in to listen that way. As well, you can also support us on Patreon, and you can also see we have T-shirts and all kinds of things with the new Podcast UFO logo graphic on that. Nicely done by Diane Cash out in Oregon. And I think that's about it. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page. It's Podcast UFO live shows over at Facebook. So go ahead and check that out. We have we have news up there every day posted by Peggy. And I want to thank everyone that helps out with the show. And that includes Evan, that includes Peggy, Keith over at the Dark Matter Digital Network, Race over at KGRA Radio. Alejandro, hopefully he'll come back. If not, we'll figure something out for the news coming up eventually. And I do want to thank you once again, and Merry Christmas to all those who celebrate. And remember, if you're keeping your eyes to the sky, you may just see Santa. But anyway, with his reindeer up there. But anyway, keep your eyes to the sky, and talk to you next week.